Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to Mastering Dungeons. I am your host, Sean Merwin, along with my co-host, Mr. Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos. Happy New Year.
Hey, Sean. Happy New Year. How are you doing?
I am doing okay. I am excited for D&D. There's been a lot on the boards, a lot on Twitter, a lot of cool stuff coming, a lot of great talk about the industry and the hobby as a whole, and I'm just looking forward to diving into it all.
I'm excited as well. And while I am in charge of my coffee cup, you are executive lead designer.
I am an executive lead designer, which means my broom is extra bristly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. I'm my first full day here, and I'm taking time out to talk with you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, well,
and all of us at home, thank you. I mean, I thank you still.
Well, that's okay. I don't do it for you.
I speak for the people, the little people.
for all the people out there.
All of us, the little people.
Let's hop into the new year with some news on reviews. So first, Shannon Appelcline takes a look back at 2020. And what did he talk about, Teos, in his RPG.net column?
Yeah, so Shannon Appelcline is one of the big historians of D&D, writes the product history reviews for most of the D&D products on the Guild, things like that. He writes recollections about the history of D&D, and he does a yearly review every year. And I think he's a little biased against D&D, which actually makes it more interesting to read his columns because they tend to have a little bit of bite to them. But he covers a lot of things across the industry and D&D. He talks about old designers who passed away, from Brian Bloom, big part of D&D's history, and lots of questions because he would never sort of speak out on how he saw history. Jim Holloway, Kim Eastland, who was the second director of the RPGA after Frank Menzer, Len Lakofka, many others in the industry. So that's one thing that it starts with is just, our hobby's getting older historically speaking. And so this is going to happen more and more. And we should treasure those folks who are in the industry. And then he talks about how D&D is at its 6th year of consecutive growth.
Wow. With
some changes as Avalon Hill, the board games group under Wizards of the Coast, moved to be directly under Hasbro. And then Hasbro and Avalon Hill relaunched the HeroQuest board game to great success as one of the first kind of parts of that change.
Which you contributed to, by the way.
I did. It was awesome and very good project. And there are things like Fantasy Flight Games divested itself of RPGs and minis. That was sort of a big change because they do Star Wars and Legend of the Five Rings and many others. Talks a lot about inclusivity as a major focus, right? This was a big part of our 2020, not just in the greater scape of our lives, but in the hobby, it was a big deal, right? It really shook the hobby as an issue, and caused companies to and players and DMs and everybody to look at inclusivity more carefully and to focus on it. It's a complex issue that the industry faced all year long and clearly will continue to face. He talks about COVID, how the pandemic impacted nearly everyone, huge impacts on conventions, how small companies sell, major distributors like Diamond threw in huge monkey wrenches and then switched back and forth. All of this was just deeply upsetting to kind of the stable way that the industry operates. I mean, you're well aware of online gaming and how that's grown.
Oh, yeah.
Conventions moved online, but not all successfully. Origins fell flat largely around issues of inclusivity. It kind of moved dates and was maybe too optimistic about when people might be there physically, and then tried to throw something online, ran into inclusivity issues, and just had to cancel outright. So we'll see what happens for this coming year. A lot of mainstream signs, RPGs becoming more mainstream. Comics books would release RPGs. In fact, I just saw today they announced that Dark Crystal is going to have an RPG. So more things like that are tied into larger media properties.
Like fast food restaurants releasing their own RPG.
That was actually ended in 2019. I had to look it up because I was like, was Wendy's in 2000? But yeah, I mean, there's been more of that. And then, of course, all of these famous people, whether it's movie stars or TV show casts, like the Star Trek folks playing Star Trek online, and streaming it. And then he kind of ends on RPG Kickstarters, which were double the number of Kickstarters that raised 200,000 or more, and slightly higher overall. And this is really looking at pure Kickstarter. So something like Matt Colville's huge Kickstarter actually doesn't always count because it might include a streaming component or other activities.
Okay.
But these are really like pure, we'd say this is a bunch of books, right?
Gotcha.
And the growth there was substantial.
Yep. Okay.
It's a really interesting column. I highly recommend looking at Shannon's series.
Yeah. And we can then look back also at what Wizards of the Coast did in 2020, such as the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount.
That was in March.
The Critical Role campaign setting, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, the Magic the Gathering crossover campaign setting. On September, it was, of course, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. October was the Curse of Strahd Revamped, which I received recently and needed 4 mules to lift. So that is quite a set. November gave us the Dungeon Master's Screen Wilderness kit, as well as Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. And you noted that this is actually a slower release in 2019, which had things like Tactical Maps, the Stranger Things box set, the Essential Starter Kit, et cetera, the Rick and Morty box set. So
Acquisitions Incorporated.
Yes, we can't forget about that book. But my Acquisitions Incorporated campaign ends tonight, so very excited.
Oh,
about
wow,
that.
that's awesome! I can't wait for you to tell me how it goes.
So yeah, it was despite COVID a pretty banner year for releases, because despite that there was still the growth of the hobby and the growth of D&D throughout 2020.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to me that this year, in terms of releases, felt pretty good. It was sort of interesting to see that it's leaner than 2019, but I don't know that it was worse for it. In fact, it might actually be stronger for it.
Yeah, I think the slower release has definitely helped the game overall, the hobby overall, and so in that sense, I think it may be stronger, and we'll see what's coming for 2020, whether they increase releases, if they decrease releases, or if they sort of shift gears and maybe release things outside the norm of books and DM screens and box sets and the like.
So we all hate picking favorites, but if you had to pick a favorite release from those things that came out in 2020, Shawn, where would you go?
That is hard to. Oh boy, that's a tough one. Yeah, I would have to go with Tasha's, not because it's necessarily my favorite, because I haven't even digested it all yet, but it moves the game forward in a way that what is both necessary and I think important for players at this point in history. I think there was a lot of anticipation for it, and so that would be my choice. Yours?
Yeah, well, that probably is the most influential of them. I would go with Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which I cannot kind of believe that I'm saying. Like, I would never have thought that before I opened the book, because this Magic the Gathering crossover. But it is a book that does exactly what it sets out to do, and it does it phenomenally well. Yeah. And I just think that was a really, really well-made book.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I don't know enough about the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. I would have said at the beginning of the year that would have been the most important, but the pandemic hitting the U.S. exactly when it did,
I may have heard it.
It may have dampened the enthusiasm or or people's willingness to part with money at that time.
Yeah, so. And as with Acquisitions Incorporated, I think that these collaborations with other groups, whether it's Critical Role or Penny Arcade, are great, but there still needs to be baked into this release, not just that the book is published, but there is some support. If there had been an organized play series of even just like 4 adventures or a few online events that were official, I think it would have stayed in the consciousness, right? A release like Wildmount would have stayed in the consciousness of all players and been a far stronger, and more people would dive into it and look at it and keep talking about it, keep using it. Right. So, yeah.
Also, a year in review for a Bundle of Holding, where they broke down their yearly sales. They said that 2020 started slowly, but ended 7% above 2019, and it's second only to 2018, where they had 67,000 customers purchasing over 50,000 bundles, including 8,000 new customers in 2020. So, again, not as much as 2018, but more growth than in 2019.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give a shout out to our friend Mike Sly Flourish Shea, who had an article on Darkvision. And I'm calling it's a very short article, but I think it's important, A, because it's so concise and so it has valuable information, and B, it's something that I was going to talk about during our review of Tasha's, and I didn't want Mike to think that I stole his thunder. And this just came up today, and these notes were written a while ago. So what Mike talks about is what Darkvision really means. And this is important, as you will come to see in our review of Tasha's today. So what does Darkvision mean? Within a specific range, a creature with Darkvision can see in darkness as if darkness were dim light. So areas of darkness are only lightly obscured as far as that creature is concerned. Okay, great. So what does lightly obscured mean? It means that if you are in a lightly obscured area, creatures have disadvantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means obviously you have disadvantage on those checks, but using your passive perception, you're at a -5 if you have disadvantage. So we're going to talk about that again later when we talk about one of the new cleric subclasses. Sound good?
Yeah, the other thing I would add is that there's an impact here on stealth.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's lightly obscured, you can try to hide.
Yep.
And so that is worth considering as well, in that if you have a situation where like your entire party is using dark vision, well, one of the things then is that actually in the dark you are lightly obscured, and so things can hide from you. Mm-hmm. And if a monster successfully hides from you, you can't sneak attack it, and so on. And so it can be, there can be further penalties to choosing the strategy of we all use dark vision, right? And it is for sure, it further underscores the whole, like, it's not like you can just see in the dark.
Right. And it's also important to note that monsters that have dark vision are under the same penalties. So if your whole party has dark vision and all the monsters have dark vision, no one brings a light, everyone is lightly obscured, so it could impact things greatly.
Yep.
So let's move into our review of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, where we will look at the next two subclasses for the cleric, the Peace Domain and the Twilight Domain. So let's start with the Peace Domain. As per usual, at first level, you get some extra domain spells, and so far I've seen nothing where I want to, light the world on fire because there is a spell or two there. Mm-hmm. At first level, the Peace Domain cleric also gets proficiency with either insight, performance, or persuasion. Nothing too out of the ordinary there as well. Now, again, at first level, you get Emboldening Bond. And this is where things start to get interesting. As an action, you can choose a number of willing creatures within 30 feet of you, which can include yourself, equal to your proficiency bonus. You create a magical bond among them for 10 minutes or until you use this feature again. While any bonded creature is in 30 feet of another one, that creature can roll a d4 and add it to the number, add that number to an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes. A creature can add the d4 no more than once per turn. Once you use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, you can regain all expended uses after a long rest. So you're getting a d4 for a number of people equal to your proficiency bonus for 10 minutes. My first thought was, okay, so I'm going to cast Bless on someone. You're going to give them Bardic Inspiration, and you're going to have a d4. It's a lot to keep track of. It's not overly powerful, but it's just one more thing to keep track of. So by itself, I think it's fine. Depending on your party makeup, it could get pretty dicey. Pun definitely intended.
Is that the to get the bonus, you have to be within 30 feet of another bonded creature.
Mm-hmm.
And so they need to keep that in mind tactically.
Right.
And 30 feet's not that huge at the low levels. Later it grows, but so that's a kind of interesting thing. It doesn't end it if you move outside of that, but you just won't get the bonus. And of course, you're going to stack this, right? You're going to cast Bless on top of it. Right. So some of the party members will have Bless. Some of them will have Bless and Emboldening Bond. Right. Then you'll have your Bardic Inspiration. I think it'd be hilarious to cast Bless. You play a Peace Domain Cleric, and you have that Bard we covered last time that has all of the different recurring Bardic Inspiration bonuses, and it'd just be hilarious.
Yeah. So it's that trouble that you run in with design. With by itself, it's fine, but when you look at it in terms of the larger whole, it can get problematic. And you have to know that if they're doing this, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. I think it's fun. I don't think it's overpowered. It's just, and you know that what's coming up has to add on to this because that's how a lot of these subclasses work. So at level 2, you get Channel Divinity, Balm of Peace. As an action, you can move up to your speed without provoking opportunity attacks. And when you move within 5 feet of any creature during this action, you can choose to restore a number of hit points equal to that creature equal to 2d6 plus your wisdom modifier. A creature can only receive this healing once whenever you take this action. Okay. It's a Channel Divinity thing, so you want to be a little more powerful because you're using a pretty good resource to do that. Yep. Really good if you've got 3 of your allies unconscious, right? Yeah. Pop that off, move to them, and you are back in business. Any thoughts from you?
I liked a lot that this really speaks to that subclass theme of being peaceful, so you're not provoking while you move, because you're just I'm the medic coming through, right? Yeah. No one attacks you, and you go past your allies, and you can heal any number of allies if you can just reach them. So that's a very powerful heal. 2d6 plus wisdom, and you're level 2. That is awesome healing at low levels. So it makes you a very powerful healer. Yep. This is arguably stronger than things like, I would say, the level 17 order domain that we talked about last week, which was boost 1 ally's attack by 2d8. I would much rather have this level 2 feature than that level 17 feature.
It's a true story you're telling. At level 6, you get Protective Bond. So when a creature affected by your Emboldening Bond is about to take damage, a second bonded creature within 30 feet of the first can use its reaction to teleport to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of the first creature. The second creature then takes all the damage instead. I don't know what this has to do with peace, but okay. And I am not a big fan of the teleportation part of this. I don't think you need the teleportation part. I think you could just as easily say another bonded creature takes the damage. Yeah. Because what happens now is you get these metagaming sons of guns who say, well, you know what? You're up on that ledge and I'm down here. Why don't you just cut yourself, take a point of damage from your dagger, and then I'll pop up. I get the free 30 feet teleport, and I'll take the point of damage instead.
It also says about to take damage, so you don't actually have to take the damage. You just act like you're going to cut yourself, and then someone can teleport to you.
Right. So it is that, yes, you will get people trying to say, well, he was about to take damage, so I teleport there, but then all these other reactions go off, and he doesn't take the damage, and therefore neither do I. So it's problematic as written. I don't mind the intent of it, but there's a lot to unpack when you start getting down into the weeds in it.
Yeah, and we already had this bond between characters between 30 feet. Like, I don't know why we needed to have the teleport to sort of explain that they physically block the blow. Like, we already have magic in play. Just leave it at magic. I don't think the teleportation gains you anything other than complications. And it's also one of those things that you might say, like, oh, you're about to get hit. I'm the cleric speaking here. Does anyone want to teleport? And then like the three people with the bond on have to sit there and think about whether they want to teleport. Yeah, no, no, never mind. Okay, next time that character a character at the bond gets hit. Hey, do you want to teleport? Well, no. Let me. You don't want that happening all the time. And it is a very tactical decision that requires analysis and discussion between players. So it's a halt kind of thing. And the teleportation, I would not have moved forward with that. But there it is.
And at level 8, you get potent spellcasting, which is the normal potent spellcasting that many of the subclasses give. At level 17, you get expansive bond. The benefits of your emboldening bond and protective bond now work when creatures are within 60 feet of each other. And moreover, when a creature uses protective bond to take someone else's damage, the creature has resistance to that damage. Again, I'm fine with that. At 17th level, heck, that's fine.
Right.
Just do the teleportation here, because at 17th level you expect people to be popping around, and it's not a big deal. So what did you think of that level 17 feature?
It's fine. I mean, certainly the 60 feet is good because you're now fighting on much larger maps usually, and there's more movement and so on, and lots of cool features. It's more heroic, so that's fine. The resistance is fine, and overall I like the idea of reinforcing a subclass, but there's always that danger design-wise, and it's not that it's bad for this, but there's always that danger when you lean into one feature and you're like, every so many levels you're going to get a little extra thing to that core feature. It's nice that it reinforces it and focuses on the subclass, but it makes it sort of the one trick that the subclass does, and you really need to love it to use it. I generally prefer that a subclass has different separate things it's giving me, but that are thematically aligned rather than constantly referring to the same lower level feature.
It is a dual-edged sword, because when it's cool and it's great and it's fun, then it becomes the focus, like you say, but it could also easily just become repetitive and less fun to play as the levels pass.
Yeah, and here, the concept is peace, and it's supposed to be things like shoulder another's burdens, aid those who fight for the way of peace, and it's always that weird, peace through combat, right? It's a little strange. Yeah. I just think this should have been not peace, but something like family or camaraderie or something like that instead.
Yeah.
The friendship domain, just
right. Yeah.
This is the My Little Pony domain, just. But peace sells, but who's buying, as the band Megadeth said.
Yeah, we suck, but you buy it. Is that what it's called? Sorry,
but this would be fun to play. You have to really be down with that core. Feature that's taking place.
True. So that was that domain. Next, we have the Twilight Domain, which is about bringing comfort to those who seek rest and protect them by venturing into the encroaching darkness to ensure that the dark is a comfort and not a terror. So what did you think right off the bat here? Something struck you.
Yeah, I noticed Twilight deities, and they have a table of example deity and pantheon, like in Greyhawk, Celestian. And this made me look back and go, wow, in older editions, you had to worship a particular deity to get domain spells or features or whatever came according to that edition.
Right.
And wow, am I glad that's no longer the case.
True.
So this table is just flavor.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily change anything. It's just, you could say, hey, here's some deities that are associated with this domain concept, but you can worship whoever you want as a character and you still can be Twilight Domain, and I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So at level 1, again, more domain spells. At level 1, you also get proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor. And this, I'm always curious about. There's basically 2 ways to go with these clerical subclasses, right? It's, do they give you martial weapons and heavy armor, or do they give you some extra skill proficiencies or other types of proficiencies? And for this one, I'm thinking there's no way they're going to do the heavy armor and martial weapons with this one, because this, for me, Twilight's like roguey. It's mystical, and boom, and boom, there's the heavy armor and martial weapons. And I'm like, okay, so if it's protection, that makes sense. If it's more about light and dark, then so let's see what comes next. Level 1, you get Eyes of Night. You have dark vision out to a range of 300 feet. That's a lot.
Yeah, this might be the biggest dark vision out there in the game. I'm curious if listeners know of any source of dark vision that's greater than 300 feet, because that's huge.
I think the Gloomstalker, for like the Gloomstalker Ranger, might have that or close to that. But yeah, that's a lot. But again, that comes back to the question of, is dark vision really great? We'll see. As an action, you can magically share that dark vision with willing creatures you can see within 10 feet of you, up to a number of creatures equal to your wisdom modifier. The shared dark vision lasts for 1 hour. Once you share it, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you expend a spell slot of any level to share it again. So it's another one of those. We saw that with the Bard subclasses. You ran out of this feature, spend a spell slot of sometimes a certain level, sometimes any level, and you get it to use it again. I like that. I mean, obviously this goes along with the theme of Twilight. You can see in the dark, yay. But it brings up Mike's article, and it brings up the question, how many groups really use light and vision as a main or as an important thing in their game? Or how many people just kind of hand wave it?
Well, and I think that's what the reality is, that groups want to get into a pattern rather than address this every single game, every single room, every single encounter, right? They want to establish their routine. Like, in a dark place, we light torches, or I cast light, or whatever it is. And so then I think what this does is it opens up the possibility that, well, what we do is we share dark vision,
right,
for an hour.
Yep.
And, but because it's equal to your wisdom modifier, you can't carry the whole party. So, the party makeup has to work. But potentially what you're doing is you're constantly granting people dark vision an hour at a time.
Right.
And that can be one of the routines that you use. And that's where it's important to then read Mike's article and think through these various factors, so you know what that means if a whole party's doing it,
right,
whether you're a player or a DM.
Yep. So, if you're in an area of light, now this is the question I had. If you're in an area of light, no, it doesn't make dim light around you, so never mind. I was going down the wrong road there. So if you're in an area of light, this doesn't really do anything for you.
Yeah, this one is this part of it is where you can see. Later we'll get into the darkness, but in this part you can just simply see with dark vision. So it only works if it's darkness. You now see it as if it's dim light.
Yeah,
if it's magical darkness, you have to look at the definition of the magical darkness, is what Crawford recently specified,
right,
to see whether it can be seen through a dark vision.
Yeah. And so I thought, well, this isn't really strong, even though it's level 1, it's not horribly strong. And then I realized, they gave you another level 1 ability, which is Vigilant Blessing. As an action, you can give one creature you touch advantage on the next initiative roll the creature makes, and you can also touch yourself. This benefit ends immediately after the roll, or if you use this feature again.
It's very healthy to touch yourself.
Yes. I like this, not touching myself, but the level 1
Vigilant Blessing.
Blessing. It's very simple. It's powerful enough that going before creatures can make a big difference in a game. So it's powerful. It's easy to adjudicate.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. Level 2, your channel divinity is Twilight Sanctuary. As an action, a sphere of twilight emanates from you. This sphere is centered on you, has a 30-foot radius, and is filled with dim light. The sphere moves. Yeah, the sphere moves with you, and it lasts for 1 minute or until you're incapacitated or die. Whenever a creature ends its turn in the sphere, you can grant that creature one of these benefits: temporary hit points equal to 1d6 plus your cleric level, or you can end an effect that's causing charm or frightened effect. So, yeah. But my first question is, what is it with temporary hit points all of a sudden? Am I just noticing this more because it seems like every character that I've DM'd for recently has been able to grant temporary hit points?
It's as if someone turned on hey, everybody, let's give temporary hit points. And I don't... Combat's are a little bit on the easy side rather than a little bit on the hard side. And so bolstering hit points on players repeatedly, giving people shields is not great.
Yeah. I am not...
in terms of the balance of the game. So I don't love the temporary hit points aspect of this.
Yeah. And so
I mean, can I just pause and say, like, if you think about how much damage creatures deal outside of big spells, which are often counterspelled or whatever, but just looking at the damage that creatures inflict, if you subtract D6 plus cleric level from the damage that is dealt, it's most of the damage.
It's true.
Across many levels of play.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can take some big fiends that are theoretically super dangerous creatures, and if you subtract D6 plus cleric level, like, that is a big nerf.
Yeah.
And so to have this happen a lot is, it's an impact.
Yeah. If I'm even like you said, some of the larger demons that might do on a claw attack, 4d6 plus 6. If you're fighting that and you're 10th level, you're right. That's a D6 plus 10. So that's a significant decrease. And then again, we bring dim light to the thing. So now you're not just getting dark vision, but you're actually making an area of dim light possibly within a brightly lit area.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like a Glabrezu does 30 points of damage, right? It's a CR9 creature. And that's if all four attacks hit. So I guess a little bit more than that. Let's see, 32 plus 14. So 46. But that's a strong, right? That is a strong attacking creature that is all about its attacks. Yeah. And still, if you're shielding that off, reducing that, it's noticeable. That is a noticeable thing to have happen.
Yep. At level 6, there's Steps of Night as a bonus action when you are in dim light or darkness. And remember, you can make your own dim light or darkness. You can magically give yourself a fly speed equal to your walking speed for 1 minute. You can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and then you regain it all after a long rest. Yeah, I'm fine with you yourself being able to fly when you're in dim light for a bit. It makes sense in the theme of the domain. You're 6th level, so people can cast fly anyway. I'm cool with that. Anything to add? Just
I mean, the dim light or darkness is a bit of a prerequisite that I don't know that you need. It means that you might have to use your feature, which requires spending a spell slot.
Yeah,
to empower. That's fine.
Yep.
Okay.
And at 8th level, you get Divine Strike. So that's the hitty level 8 one. And of course, you can always swap that out for the Blessed Strikes of the alternate abilities of a cleric. And at level 17, you get Twilight Shroud. The twilight that you summon offers a protective embrace. You and your allies have half cover while in the sphere created by your Twilight Sanctuary. Just so you know, a target with half cover has a +2 bonus to armor class and +2 on dexterity saving throws.
Yeah, I feel like we don't super need armor class boosts in the game, but that's probably just because I keep seeing characters that, parties where 2 of the characters have unhittable ACs already.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm a huge fan of players that have low ACs. I mean, really, because it makes the game so much more fun.
It makes it fun for DMs, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't, and it's not like they're dying, right? It's not like what we hear about is 5e murders characters, and so I almost feel like designers should have like a checklist of caution, green light, like a yellow, green light, red light table of things that subclass features might boost often.
Right.
And AC should be in at least the yellow, if not the red zone.
Right.
And temporary hit points should be in the yellow zone, right? And be careful about doing this because it can impact the game so sharply, right? And so this is every time you're doing that Twilight, you are giving them temps, you're giving them the bonus to AC and dexterity saving throws. That's a big buffing going on. So it's cool. I really like this. And overall, I like all of this. I love the theme. I really like this theme. I like this subclass. I would enjoy playing it. I worry that it's a bit strong in the wrong sort of categories for just a better game.
Right. I cannot argue with that. And next time we will move on and look at possibly the Druid. Is that what comes after C? I believe it's D. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
By the way, the Gloomstalker can be 90 feet.
90 feet.
Yeah, maybe it has a later feature that bolstered further. I should probably check that. But.
Yeah, I'm one of my players has it out to 300 feet, I think.
Okay, so maybe later. I'll look and see if it gets.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember how he cheats though, so that might be it.
That's probably what it is.
But we are now going to leave Tasha's cauldron, crawl our way out, and dry ourselves off from whatever was in that cauldron, and get into the cold and windy Icewind Dale, where we will look at Chapter 4, Destruction's Light. So in Chapter 3, the characters were sent to investigate Sunblight, the Duergar fortress of Xarkorok Sunblight. When they get there, they have a choice whether they can continue into the fortress or turn back to stop the Shardlin dragon that flew out to attack the 10 towns. At this point, PCs are either 5th level if they have gone back to the dragon, or 6th level if they went into the fortress and are now going to stop the dragon.
Yeah, there's a small chance you could be 4th.
Right.
But it's probably, hopefully, small.
Right. So, you want to tell us the premise of this chapter, Mr. Abadia?
Yeah, so there's a quote there. It says, "The point of this chapter, beyond pitting the characters against a formidable draconic foe, is to make the players aware that their characters' choices have consequences. If the characters do nothing to stop the dragon, 10 towns will be destroyed. Many lives hang in the balance." And I love this premise. This is a sweet, awesome premise. What we're going to get into is how to make the adventure deliver on that, because it falls a little short of that. Spoiler.
It does. It does. And we are going to try to get through all of Chapter 4 today, so we may be light on very specific details, but we are going to try to give you sort of an overview for how to maybe change what's there to make it deliver on this cool premise that's provided.
And the chapter has a number of sections. I like how it's broken down, and we might do it a little differently just to try to, for the interest of time and logic. Mm-hmm. And let's start with the concept that is important to understand, which is returning to 10 towns. You're dealing with the fact that the dragon has a particular flight path, and we get both a map and a table. The map shows the way it's flying, which town in which order. And then we get a little table that shows us how many hours it takes to go from each town and from Sunblight to the first town and so on. Mm-hmm. Each step in the path, how long it takes the dragon. Yep. But then additionally, we are told in the text of each town how long the dragon takes staying there and fighting off whatever resistance it does or doesn't experience.
Right.
And that's a mistake that this table should have addressed. The table should then have how long are you actually there, because it's not just that flight path table, it's also the how long you stay.
Right.
Woo.
And if you don't read carefully ahead of time, you may think that the flight time includes the destruction time, but it definitely does not.
Yeah. It also takes hit points of damage at various towns. I love the narrative quality of that, but it actually doesn't need to take damage. And we'll talk about fighting the dragon later, but sure. It's worth noting that. What I do love, we'll talk about this more later too, is that it really, it shakes up the 10 towns. Mm-hmm. And I'm impressed. You don't usually see Wizards of the Coast destroy NPCs and level buildings and all that kind of thing. And named NPCs die. This is a big deal. That part is really cool.
Yeah, especially if the dragon, gets all the way through its cycle and gets to Bryn Shander and is not stopped. I was thinking, you'll lose a few. No, it's most of the people in the 10 towns die. I think there are 300 survive?
I forget what the total is, but most towns lose between half to 3/4 of their population. And then they have all this thing where the survivors go to the final town.
Right.
And there it's a horrible bloodbath that takes place.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the dragon, invisible Duergar are also popping out to support the dragon as part of this scheme.
Yeah.
All right, so then one of the questions about whether you can the PCs get back in time? And this is the thing that I think is the hardest and maybe where this adventure really could have done better is to help the DM with what the DM needs to know to run it. Because what's going to happen is you're going to make a decision whether to go into the fortress or not. At some point, you are now going to try to run back to town. And the question is, can they get there in time? Where should they go? Mm-hmm. The adventure throws in a little wrinkle in that when they decide to turn back to town, up comes this sled, 3 sleds that are driven by kobolds and kobold zombies and headed up by Vigilant Harpel, a wizard of the Arcane Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And she will say, I'll take you back to town, which maybe the characters want that, maybe not. I mean, so she's got zombies.
Yeah.
And she says she will suggest going to Bryn Shander, where the towners will set their final stand. And she does say final stand. So the good news is, hey, you will not miss the dragon if you do that, and you will help. But all other 9 towns will be destroyed if you go that route. Mm-hmm. So you should probably let your characters think about it and use any knowledge they have, because it should be clear this is like all other 9. You're sacrificing all 9 towns to go help with this big stand. She can be persuaded to fight the dragon, primarily by using a wand of magic missiles. That makes it easier. Mm-hmm. And I think just in general, my thought as a player would be, and even as a DM, is really they can get somewhere in time to stop a flying dragon.
Yeah.
And that gets us into a whole thing about travel times, which is very confusing because travel times in this book are found in individual chapters and are based on the roads between towns.
Right.
Or we can use the general 1 mile per hour sled time, but it says that you have to rest an hour every other hour to avoid exhaustion for sleds. So it gets really confusing as to how you're supposed to measure things. The easiest is to use the travel times between towns. And one thing that's fortunate, I'll just cut to the chase here, is that someone did all this work on the website alexandrian.net. Mm-hmm. And what it makes sense tactically is to always go to Dugan's Hole first, and from there travel the roads to any town that you decide to go to. So because of that, it makes calculating time easier, because you're not trying to like go around lakes and all these kinds of things. You're just going to this one town and from there going to different ones. And what it all really kind of breaks down to be is that it is impossible to save. No matter what your decision is, you cannot get there fast enough. Whether you went into Sunblight or not, you cannot get to Dugan's Hole, Goodmead, East Haven, Caerdinival, or Carconig, even if you go straight there as your first priority.
Yep.
The dragon will always beat you there no matter what happened. And that's sort of fascinating because, again, this premise is all about choice. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes the question of, do the characters know where to go? They could always just save one town and go to the end.
Right.
But assuming they don't want to do that and they want to try to be smart about it, how do they know? Well, if they have the map, they know the order it's going in, but then they're just guessing. Mm-hmm. The best case scenario is you go to Tarmalane. You arrive 90 minutes before the dragon does. This is assuming you didn't go into Sunblight. And you can stop the dragon there, and that saves all the other towns, which means you save Tarmalane and 4 other towns.
Yep.
So 5 towns. Half the towns is your best case scenario. Right. Your worst case scenario is your characters choose a town, find the dragon's already been there. Now they've lost time, and they'll probably go to a town that the dragon has also been to, at least by the time they get there, and they may save no towns.
Right.
Or only Bryn Shander.
Right, because if they don't go into the fortress, they don't know the path that the dragon's taking.
Right.
And that's super important to remember. And
even if they do, they could guess wrong.
Right.
Which is really dissatisfying. Like if you know the path and you go, oh, okay, great, let's go to Carconig, which is, somewhere in the middle of where it's like the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 6th town it's going to. Well, if you go to Carconig, you're not getting there in time.
Yep.
And now what do you do?
Right.
Oh, maybe we just go to Bryn Shander and save one town.
Right.
What was the point of getting the map?
Yeah.
It's a bit infuriating.
And if your players are like most of the players that I deal with, when they're presented with this problem, they want all the information up front to make this choice.
Yeah.
They want to know what they're dealing with. They want to make the optimal choice, but as the book presents it, even you as the DM don't know. And you can go through and do what this person on this website did, but even then there is some conjecture on his or her part when they created this this travel time document. So as you point out, it doesn't say, well, did you just spend 14 hours getting to Sunblight? Are you exhausted? How did you do a forced march? Because if you go by the travel rules, that's what you should be using. Yeah. And so as the DM, you might need to make an executive decision and say, okay, based on your nature check or a skill check, that from the mountain you can see in the distance the dot of the dragon, and therefore its path. You may have to decide that you can give them a hard choice still. You'll have to decide what that hard choice is. Maybe you can get to the third town in time, but you're going to have a level of exhaustion to get there. Then you're making an interesting choice for your players.
Yeah, and I would, what I would look at as, and I'd say this largely to people who design, don't create unnecessary math or unclear math for DMs when you design. Because, as you said, players want to know. They want to make intelligent choices, and so they'll say to the DM, wait, help me understand this, right? What do I know? What do I see? And if the answer is nothing, that's very dissatisfying. And the whole point is about making this a choice. And so ideally what adventurers do is they provide you with good data, so you have some clarity, you feel smart about making a decision, but that decision is hard, right? Because there's an emotional piece, or because you can't weigh the factors. You have good data, but you must make a gut check, right? Which is your favorite town, or save the important town but lose 2 other towns, or something like that is something that players, I think, grasp very well. In this particular case, the last thing that I think we want to see any DMs doing is sitting there trying to extrapolate math.
Yeah.
And that's the easy thing that happens when you read this chapter, or the most likely thing is that the DM will try to pull out a ruler and figure things out. And that's not what's going to lead to satisfaction. So my recommendation would be, along the lines of what you're saying, provide checks to allow them to have some better understanding of where to go. And I would actually almost think about a new method that you could do to say, to combine factors so that the decisions seem important, right? There should probably be some advantage to using these 3 sled dogs that Valine Harpel, her name is, provides, right? That should be some advantage even if they have sled dogs. And so maybe that's like a +1 town saved. And maybe if they make a nature check, that's a +1 town saved. And if they make a survival check, +1 town saved. Maybe having the map is +2 towns saved. But maybe you lose a town for each level of Sunblight you explored. And -1 if you took each short rest that you might take. -1 if you travel on foot, something like that. And now you can do a very quick math that could have been in a little table to say, hey, and you could even do this in your head just as a DM, it feels like they did a pretty good job. They at baseline's arriving at Lonelywood, and then I can move it up and down which one you arrive. And now we have a story, and we have implications, and can feel it. So I would suggest to DMs to somehow try to think through this and not worry about measuring exact distances, but more how to make decisions translate to which town they're going to get to.
Yep. I agree. So let's talk for a minute then about the actual dragon battle itself. Any thoughts on, once the characters get to the dragon, what to do? Does it change depending on the town they're in? How would you handle that?
So the dragon is CR 11, which means it's well beyond a deadly fight for level 5 PCs. But I think it's actually okay for level 5 PCs because it does not have legendary features, and it's while it can deal some really strong damage. There is a YouTube where Tom Christie, who's a well-known Adventures League DM, records actual play of the level 6 party, and he boosts the hit points of the dragon by a large amount, maybe 150% of its normal hit points. And they have no problem, this level 6 party, dispatching the dragon. And it is a cool monster, but I think at level 6 it's easy. I think at level 5 it's probably decently fine. At level 4 it's probably very hard.
Yeah,
so it's a little bit hard. And
I think the difference between level 4 and level 5 is huge here.
Huge.
Because once you get to 5th level, you get those big boom spells and the extra attacks and so on. Because when I looked at the monster, I'm like, ooh, CR 11. And then I looked at the hit points, and I'm at 147. A 6th level party could probably do that in 2 rounds, even with an armor class of 17.
And the tactics aren't very clear. We get a statement that is more about how it attacks towns, that it likes to strafe settlements from the air until it's incinerated, all sorts of stuff, and then it'll land down to just, eliminate any survivors. And that's what all dragons can do that's just completely insane, is if the dragon just strafes you, strafes you, and all the players are doing is attacking with ranged weapons, and you're going to have a number of combatants that aren't good at range, the dragon will win.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is down to the DM of when do you want your dragon to land. And what I'd probably do is have it do, a breath weapon, fly away for a round to give him some sense of, doom, recharge its breath weapon, land and breathe, right? Because the players will hopefully have not stayed in breath weapon formation. And that at least is very hard, hopefully, but it is now gives them a chance because it's on the ground. Because it's overly smart. The other thing that's really bizarre about this is there is a thing here that says that if they deal 30 damage to the dragon flies to the next town. That will mean that the 10 towns are going to probably burn because you can't catch up to the dragon. And since you're probably at least halfway through the list, you could skip a town, but that's very dissatisfying. So I would not have it fly away, or at least if you're going to have it fly away, I would telegraph that, communicate that ahead of time, give players lots of very easy checks so they can see that its intent is to fly away because of the damage it's taken. And then give them ways to keep it there. Like, if you can pin its wing, or if you're on top of it, or, create some heroism here so that it does not fly away, because I think that would be very dissatisfying.
Yeah, and if it does, leave it in that next town so that if the characters follow it, they can catch up to it.
Yeah.
Have it spend an extra 2 hours attacking the town rather than just after 30 minutes decimating everything and then leaving.
And the sort of control valve that this encounter has is that it goes in the final town, it stays there fighting for like 6 hours, which is a long time.
Yeah. And it also, the dragon has allies that will come and help it in the form of Duergar. So you can always play around with adding those Duergar, adding a couple extra if your party is very strong, because that will then give one more element to the fight that the characters will have to deal with. And it has a malevolent presence ability, which is interesting. It can basically charm creatures, and the DC on the saving throw is DC 16 Wisdom saving throw.
It's tough.
Yeah, that is tough. And it's any creature within 30 feet of it, so that's a lot. You do get a save at the end of each of your turns to end the effect, but it can do it to NPCs. Yeah. And so they might join the dragon, in fighting the characters and their allies if they fail. So that's another way that you can use that, its abilities to make the combat more interesting if it looks like the party is going to kill it in 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I really like the Towns and Chaos table, which is a table where you can roll to see these various events, including Duergar attacking, and they have sort of different things, like an invisible Duergar or a huge, enlarged Duergar, thieves that are robbing the town, a villager that needs help, stumbles in wounded. those are great because what they do is if your combat's too easy, throw these in there, because what they often do is not just add something to fight, but they remove one or more characters for a round as they deal with this emergency to be heroic. And this is always a good tactic to have this under your wings, and you can pull out when you need to distract a PC by, hey, don't you want to save this poor PC that's about to get crushed by a building?
Right.
Of course you do, and now you're not attacking the dragon for a round.
Yeah, that is very nice. So overall, the idea behind this chapter is wonderful. This idea of not just beating down the doors of a dungeon and killing everything inside, but actually thinking and planning and fighting a battle that is very unique to D&D in some ways. Is great. You just need to be able to, willing to, ready to help the PCs understand what their situation is by you understanding what their situation is and how you want the narrative to go based on their choices and the consequences of those choices.
Yeah, and we talked about impact on 10 towns. The book lists town by town what happens when the dragon visits each of the towns, and it's a great narrative. Like, I really love how this is written. It's exciting and it's neat, and it reminds you of all these various NPCs and buildings that we haven't seen in a couple of chapters. And that's a thing that can happen, is that your players might have sort of forgotten about the important parts of this town. And so one of the things that I think you should do, obviously in the town that they visit, you can describe some of this devastation that's happening. But afterwards, give the players some time to tour the 10 towns and see its impacts and maybe help in small ways.
Right.
They have some coins they want to distribute to like fix some places up. But they should hear about all these things that took place. Like, there's some neat stories about like the speaker who's a dragonborn who's drunk. He's actually passed out in a snowbank when the dragon comes, so he lives. And then he deals with his guilt.
Right.
Like, this becomes a thing that, they must carry with them, the fact that they were like the one person in that town that could have stood up to the dragon, and instead failed, they were drunk, passed out, and so they missed it.
There's a opportunity here to do something with, say, downtime. To do that tour of the town, to help rebuild, to take advantage of some opportunities, if the characters want to do a business or something like that. That's a great time.
And we talked about Goodmead as a cool home base, and in your early chapters as a possible town to focus on. You might be its speaker, right? And one of the cool things is, officially, it has its mead hall spared, which is also the main government hall. So that's good news if you made it your headquarters or franchise. And in fact, it could be fun if you're using the franchise rules. You can use your hirelings to further help and reduce damage. That require some checks to maybe even see how well the characters train their hirelings. That could save some other buildings. There's a lot of neat things you could do, and certainly downtime. East Haven spares its main building, so that's another one that we had suggested as a good starting town. And again, there are some things left there that PCs can rebuild around there. So I would try to emotionally appeal to the characters and tie them into this restoration, not have them go like, oh, cool, we saved the towns, you're all in ruins. Later, we got to go on our next quest.
Yeah. Speaking of that next quest, it just so happens that the quest giver is Valine, who maybe offered some sled dog help, or kind of helped the characters in the battle with the dragon a bit.
A bit.
So as long as the characters are 7th level, then Velen is ready to tell them about this lost city from Netheril that is buried under the ice, and she needs their help to get to it. And that is the hook for the next chapter and the rest of the adventure, basically.
Yeah, I almost thought that this information should have been pushed to the next chapter rather than put at the end here.
Yeah, it was odd that all this was going on, but you sort of hear more information than you need about the next quest, because she doesn't tell you She doesn't tell the characters about it until she knows that they're ready
Right.
to take it on. So it may be the
I thought it was funny. At one point, the book says something like, if they aren't quite high enough level, have them do some more Chapter 2 quests, wander around the 10 towns. I'm like, what? No, stay on the story. Like,
yeah.
Just bump them up in level. But, it does say, you could, a thing that is logical is if they've not taken down Xarkorok, right? Obviously, he sent the dragon, so go deal with him for sure. So if you haven't been to Sunblight, they can go to Sunblight first, and then Valine will contact them. And similarly, if they aren't 7th level, or if the dragon somehow has not been defeated, like those things should happen. There is time to do things like survey the destruction or finish any loose ends you had. Like if the characters really want to establish peace between the Goliath tribes, hey, have at it, right?
Yep. True. So that is Chapter 4. Did you have anything else to add before we shut down for the day?
No, we'll put the details of Valine's quest in the next chapter. I love the chapter's premise, and I think that this in play, if a DM does the right work here, this is going to be a really memorable chapter for players, and they'll have no idea. Done correctly, players will have no idea sort of what you had to do to make it awesome, and it will just be awesome.
Exactly. So thank you to all our listeners, and thank you to our patrons. And I wanted to give a shout out to some more patrons, to Old School DM Randy Farmer, to Troy Sandland, Will Doyle, Zach Goins, Chris Constantine, Cindy Moore, Eric Simon, Mirko Froelich, Andrew Demps, Brantley Harris, Chris Steele, Chromatic Chameleon, Cubano, Curtis Y. Takahashi, Derek Broughton, Eric Mengi, JT Evans, Jared Rasher, Jen Pixelscapes Gagney, Jim Fitzpatrick, Joseph Peralta, Carl Halprin, Merrick Blackman, Mike Amer, My Brett, Ninjabi, Rainmaker, Richard Ruan, Rory McLeod, Savannah Sizer, Scott Ryder, Steve Bissonette, Steve Radabaugh, T. Kustik, Ted Atkinson, and Victor Wyatt. Thank you so much for being patrons of the show. If you would like to be a patron, you can go to patreon.com/MMP and provide us with a little bit of money for our efforts. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Teos, where can people find you on social media?
You can come talk about mastering dungeons on Twitter at AlphaStream or on the Misdirected Mark forums. And I have a blog at alphastream.org.
You can find me on Twitter at Sean Merwin or at the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. And now you can follow this podcast on Twitter at MasteringDND. Mastering Dungeons is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. So, Teos, our guide in the 10 towns. What are we going to do now?
Let's go kill some monsters before they destroy our towns.
That's a great idea. Where should we go first?